All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today. Today's blab, if you will, is going to be about millennials and real estate, the next generation of home buyers. We've heard a lot of things over the past about, or in the recent past, I guess, about what millennials mean to real estate. And I know a lot of realtors who are very upset, or not really upset, but maybe like tired of hearing about millennials, right? And so I want to talk about millennials and what they mean for the real estate market. And I think a lot of realtors aren't using or leveraging or putting themselves in a position to really capture that market. And so we want to talk about the attitude of real estate with millennials. We want to talk about what they're actually looking for in real estate, especially for home sellers. If you're in a 3-bedroom home and your home is the starter home that you bought maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, your home may be very attractive to a millennial buyer, not a move-up buyer. And so what are the things that millennials are actually looking for in a home? So we want to go ahead and get started. But first, let me introduce Tracy Swift here. She's my co-host. So I really appreciate you joining me here today, Tracy. So please tell everybody about yourself and how we can get a hold of you.
Sure. Again, my name is Tracy Swift. And if you haven't recognized, I still have my New York accent. I'm originally from New York, and I relocated to Phoenix, Arizona a little over 2.5 years ago. I work in North Scottsdale, but I service the whole Phoenix metro area. And I have a site called Phoenix Fun, PHXFUN on Facebook. It's my community page. My phone number is 480-599-7746 for my business. And you can also reach me on LinkedIn. And I'm also on Twitter at SwiftlySaid38. And just contact me. My email is Tracy, TRACEY.Swift @AZ, like Arizona, moves, plural, MOVES.com. So that's all my contact info.
All right, cool. All right, good. Thank you for doing that. And let's start off by let's define what a millennial is. Some people don't even know what that is, what that demographic is. So tell everybody, Tracy, what is a millennial? What age group are we looking at here?
Well, we're looking at people born between 1981 and 1997. Okay. It's about 4.3 million millennials turning 30, and 4.6 million by 2020. And at that point, there'll be more adults in their 30s than any other time in the U.S. So a very large segment of the population. We always hear about baby boomers, and they're one of the biggest generations. And now we're kind of moving on to the millennial generation.
And I've heard millennials are actually a bigger segment of the population than even baby boomers.
Yes, it just surpassed. Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a huge segment of our population. That's why I say, when we're talking about millennials and what's happening, we can't ignore it. I mean, it's just a huge part of our segment of the population. So we want to pay attention to that. Now, one of the things that I want to really talk about here is the attitude toward real estate, because I've seen a big shift in the attitude toward real estate since 2008. Here in Phoenix, with the buyers that I'm kind of associated with, they all are, I'd rather rent. I don't want to buy. I don't want to be exposed to the downward pressures. And we feel that there may be another crash and all sorts of, things that they say are kind of contradictory to the way I was brought up. I was brought up that, hey, they're not making any more land except in Hawaii, right? But millennials don't even really care about that. They just want to rent, and the lackadaisical, I could care less, and not really thinking that far ahead. Is that what you find too, Tracy?
Yes, I am finding it. And my brother is a millennial, and there's a huge difference between me and him, and, the 6 years that we're apart. And I'm seeing a definite trend towards millennials staying at home longer with their families, more communal type living spaces, being drawn to renting, so they're not tied down to one particular location. And I think a lot of this has to do with the economy. Almost the entire, past 10 years for millennials has been kind of negative, from the economic crash. And even to your point, Jason, in Arizona, which was so hit by the 2008, which our bottom of our market actually was 2011, which people don't realize. But there's been just so much negativity with home ownership and distrust in lending, realtors, the government, you name it. It's just a very different demographic we're dealing with from when, other people grew up during the baby boomer generation.
So I want to bring this up because, there's people who disagree with what I said, but I think that we are a product of our environment. And we talked before the show here, Tracy, a little bit about this. Right now, it's difficult to save for a down payment. It's difficult with the student loan debt, with rents being as high as they are, and the salaries being as low as they are. It's very difficult for somebody coming out of college to actually save to purchase a home. And because of that, I feel that they get a little disgruntled for property. Although their attitude may be, hey, I want to buy some land. I want to buy, but I can't. I don't know where to begin. I can't save money. I'm just scrapping around just to try to pinch a penny and stretch it into a manhole cover, right? Yeah. So they get a little disgruntled about the whole process, and it comes out. And so that's what I'm seeing. Is that kind of the same thing? I'm not trying to discourage saying that they don't want to buy a house. I think they do, but they're frustrated on how to go about it.
Yeah, I think the time frame is very different. When you look how long it takes to get a job these days, where the jobs are located, how much college debt a lot of these, people have. I mean, there's just not a whole lot of cash to put on a down payment, as you mentioned.
Right.
And sometimes people just don't want to commit yet to one place because they don't know where they're going to work. They don't know how long that company is going to employ them. And you do have this kind of downward pressure on wages, and people have to go where the jobs go, and people don't like to be tied down the way, at least, coming from the East Coast, a lot of people were born and stay and die in New York. I'm one of the few that left. I think we're going to see more and more of a trend of people moving around the country. And I think that does impact home ownership, because home ownership usually is a long-term plan. You don't want to buy a house for 3 years. I mean, unless you're flipping houses, of course, you're going to make a ton of money on it.
Right.
It's a process to buy a house. It's not the easiest thing in the world. As a lender, all the paperwork that people have to go through. It's an interesting time that we're in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I read statistics that 2 out of 5, millennials are making less than $30,000 a year. I forget the stat, but it's like 37% or something. A high percentage of millennials actually still live at home and live with their parents, and it's actually accepted. I was speaking to you before the show here, and there's no way I was going to live with my dad. There's just no way. When I turned 18, I was out of the house. But today it seems a little more accepted. My brother being one of them, he's 32 years old. He still lives with my dad, and he doesn't see a problem with it. Where I look at him and I say, "Are you kidding me? Why aren't you out on your own? You're 32 years old." So I don't know. The attitude just seems to have changed completely when it comes to arrangements for living for millennials.
Oh, I think absolutely. And, from the real estate side, I'm seeing the millennials staying with their parents longer, whether it's to save money, or they don't have the money, or they don't have the job yet, or they're actually being really smart and saving a ton of money. And then 10 years down the road, they'll just buy a really big house, and we'll see how that comes out in the statistics. But overall, you're also seeing multi-generational families in general, because now you have people who are baby boomers that are now having their elderly parents, in their homes, So there's a lot going on. I think it's a very interesting real estate market that we're in, but a majority of it is because I think of the economy. I think it's really not just judging millennials and saying they're these urban hipsters that want to all live in, communal living spaces. I think part of that is also economically driven.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Dan says, hey, I live with my parents to save some money. And I think that's so true. That's what my brother does. However, my brother's he's a little odd duck. He has no money to show for it. He just parties. So, he's not one of those guys who has the discipline to save for a down payment. Although he talks about buying a house all the time. He's like, hey, I'll call you as soon as I can buy a house. But then he can't save a penny to save his life. So I know we were trying to get in Mac S, I think. And we're going to try it again here. I think he was having a little bit of problem with his internet.
Give me 1 second.
Are you there, buddy?
Yes, I am. But just let me get the camera thing working.
All right, cool. Yeah. I see your picture, but I don't see your face there. Looks like your Manicam or something's up there.
Yes.
Yeah, Jim, sounds like we got the same brother, right? Same brother from a different mother kind of thing. My brother, he's the youngest, so he's a little spoiled. So he thinks it's okay to live with dad and mooch off my dad. Everybody else in the family gives him a hard time. So now, with that, let's keep here. We'll try it one more time here. Hopefully, you can get in here. There you are.
It's working. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, before you start here, tell everybody who you are, how we can get a hold of you, because like I said at the beginning of the show, I do put this on my podcast, so it will be on iTunes. So definitely, plug yourself real quick.
Okay. So Maxim Netrabov, or just Max. I'm president, founder of Max Financial Services. I'm a independent financial planner here in New Jersey. I am a millennial, barely, so 1982, so almost kind of fit in that trend. And it's a very interesting conversation. I know I followed a couple of your podcasts before, and I think this topic in particular, it's going to have a lot of, it can draw a lot of reactions one way or the other. And it's really interesting just from the different viewpoints you can have, particularly. So one of the subspecialties that we deal with is alternatives and direct investments, real estate being one of them. Right. And more, we're kind of hearing this trend from the real estate developers, from the multifamily developers. Hey, what's going on? What's happening with the millennials? But Tracy, you kind of hit upon a point a little bit earlier. So I was my first job when I was recruited to UBS. I'm like, hey, you know what? This is going to be a great place. I'm going to have high income. Let me go buy my first home. So this was in 2005, which was also pretty much the peak of the market. I was actually spared when 2 weeks after I signed the contract, I basically get notification that my manager, which was the reason why I was going to that particular office, was going to be going. And now I would have to commute an hour back towards a different direction. So pretty much had my friend who was a mortgage broker, got him a letter. He got me a letter stating, hey, get me out of this mortgage, and didn't close on my house. And that was one of the best things that happened because, well, then the market tanked, would have lost money. And for the last 8-9 years here in New Jersey, I've been renting because it just doesn't make sense to buy. Right. Particularly, as a millennial, it's like, okay, well, in New Jersey, for anything that we would want house-wise, the property taxes would be almost as much as what I'm paying in rent right now. It's like I can't, for the life of me, imagine paying over $1,000 a month in property taxes for something that I wouldn't get back ever. Right. So it's kind of like, okay, taking the opportunity, saved up money, and then just go skip the starter home and go straight into, this is the home that I really, really want, your 3,000 square foot home, 3-car garage, and so forth. Whether that's going to be in New Jersey, whether it's going to be elsewhere.
Now, let me ask you something here real quick, because you bring up something that I think is a good point here, and I'm getting a little bit of feedback. So I think it's your computer. It might be.
I'm going to move the mic a little bit closer.
All right, cool. So I think the millennial generation seems to be the best educated when it comes to the overall picture. When I first bought my house, I thought, oh, house is just like paying rent. What the heck do I care? As long as my rent doesn't exceed, or my mortgage payment doesn't exceed what I'm paying in rent, okay, I'm cool. I didn't factor in all the costs associated with actually owning the house.
Yeah.
So I think I've seen millennials be a lot more cautious and a lot more educated, and they educate themselves by going online and reading a bunch of articles where, when I first bought, online really wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah,
it's definitely a true point. Think of it this way. 8-9 years ago, what was the talk? Okay, if you're a mortgage broker, if you're a realtor, you need to have a website. If now it's like, hey, if you don't have a website, or if you don't show up on Google, what's wrong with you? The first place we're going to go look is we're going to go on Google. We are going to research. And I think also the plethora of information that's out there, no matter the industry, it makes everybody, I think particularly the millennials, it makes us sticklers, that we're not going to be like, you can be presenting the best thing in the world, but we're going to be thinking in the back of our heads, what's wrong with it? Or what aren't you telling me?
Right. Distrust. And a lot of millennials get what is not Jimmy Kimmel, but what's the other the guy who just went off the air?
Oh,
A lot of people get their news from there rather than
Jon Stewart.
yeah, Jon Stewart. A lot of millennials get their news from Jon Stewart rather
Two
than
towns over for me.
oh, is he?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, it's just a different way that they're getting their information, but they are getting information where before this information just wasn't out there other than talking to your parents.
absolutely.
That was my resource when I was growing up, you know? So I think, and to Justin's point here on the chat room, he said, you can't always trust what you read or see on the internet. And that's
Sure.
so there's a lot of that bad information.
It's a starting point, and I think it really kind of going back to it. I mean, the best thing that a real estate professional can do is like, hey, don't try to make up our mind for us.
Mhm.
Just give me the information. You have all the information. Filter it into what does it mean for me, and then let us basically make the determination what we want to do one way or the other.
Right. Now, what would you say about this, and Tracy, if you want to add something, go right ahead. But what would you say about we're seeing here a big trend with the builders building homes that have, maybe, not so big of yards. They're smaller yards, less maintenance, and they're really trying to go after that, your demographic as a millennial, to appeal to them. Now, when I was growing up, it was, hey, I want to buy lots of land. Not saying that millennials don't want to buy lots of land, but it just seems that there's a target there for the condos, for the community type of living, just one step up from apartment living kind of deal.
So I think that's where it's going to depend on a person to person. I mean, I think millennials as a whole, if you want to paint them with a broad brush, yes, that is actually so. Even a lot of the, I'm just thinking, the last two student housing and lifestyle urban center developers and the private deals that I saw come across my desk, the units were significantly smaller in size in order to fit more units into them. But I mean, I think the best way of thinking about it is if you live in New York or if you live in an urban community, it's kind of like Las Vegas. There'll be people who go to Las Vegas, hey, I want to have the nicest room, and because I'm going to spend a lot of time there. And then you'll have people like, hey, you know what? It's just a place for my bed, and that's where I sleep. And my life is around outside.
Yes.
Like I said, me personally, I need my ideal home. I want a big 3,000 square foot house minimum. And I want 8 acres of land.
You sound
that's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, like I said, I mean, that's already, I guess, maybe a lot of the Gen X influence that comes from it. But on the whole, I think it's for my millennial clients, they're okay having a slightly smaller space if it means living in the community. And I think it'll also depend on whether somebody has been used to living in the city. I have friends who live in Hoboken and Jersey City. For a 2-bedroom apartment, they're paying $3,000 a month. Yeah. And that's actually a steal because it's cheaper than the same thing that would be $4,000 a month in New York City.
Right.
Meanwhile, you talk to somebody else, it's like, wow, you're paying how much money for what?
Right. Now, let me throw this at you because, I read these articles and there's a lot of pressure right now to open up the lending, let that loosen up a little bit, if you will. And we've heard over the past 5-6 years how difficult it is to get a loan. You got to give your firstborn and left arm and all that kind of stuff. How much of a discouragement is that for millennials, given the pressure of, like you said, a lot of people making less than $31,000 a year, having the student loan debt that they have, gas prices as high as they are, food prices as high as they are. I mean, it's tough to save for a home. No question.
I think it's an excuse. Maybe it's coming from there's a comment in chat. I'm in the wrong generation. Yes. And I'm definitely not speaking as a millennial. So you kind of gave the quote, but was it how many percentage of millennials that are making less than 30,000?
I think you said like 50% or something.
No, actually it wasn't. So I responded back with the 51%. There was an article from somewhere. It's on my Twitter page, in my Twitter feed. You can find it there. Yeah. But about more than half of Americans make less than more than half of working Americans make less than $30,000 a year. So I don't think it's a millennial problem. I think it's an America problem.
It's a wage problem.
And it's kind of like, okay, well, let's find whatever it is and see what can explain it, while it's missing the bigger trend. But I mean, so as a fiscal conservative, and we got into the global financial crisis because of loose lending standards, and I would argue they're already there. I mean, you can go get a home right now with 3% down payment.
Yep. FHA.
Right.
So, I mean, how much more loose can you get? I mean, if you have a 600 FICO, you can get it.
Right.
I agree with you 100%.
But that's part of the education process too. We hear in the mainstream media that it's so difficult, but when you get into like yourself, you're kind of intimately knowledgeable about it. Tracy, of course, myself, we know that. But when I go out on the street and they think, I still hear to this day, you got to put 20% down to buy a house, don't you, Jason?
Yeah.
There's still this misinformation out there, and that's the purpose of the podcast and this blab, of course, is getting that right information out.
I think a lot of that 20% down too is a regional difference, because coming from New York, that's all I knew was 20%. And boy, you were being very risk-taking individual if you did 10%. Yet coming out to Arizona, the majority of my buyers, including ones that do well financially, want to do the FHA loans, 3.5% or 5% or 10%, because they have a distrust of the market here that if something goes down again, they don't want to lose that 20% of their equity. Yeah. It's almost like people are so distrustful of the economy that they want less skin in the game there if they have to exit out, and it's an interesting point, because I wasn't raised that way. I mean, every house I bought was 20% down.
Yeah. I'd also think it depends on the market segment that you're looking at, and also so two things: the market segment, meaning number one is if you're looking at a modest home, for your first home, your second home, you may not be able to get 20% down if you're in the Northeast. I mean, if you're looking to buy a home for $400,000, 20% is $80,000 and that's more than what most Americans have anyway. So you're looking at the FHA. But talking to my realtor friends in Florida, we have a number of clients down there, and in Florida, she's like, half of her deals are either cash only deals. It's all speculating. It's all long-term money. It's all European money. It's all Asian money. Right. And on the second point of it is, I believe in Texas, you have homestead laws that you basically, you can't HELOC money out of your home. You have to have 80%. You have to have at least 20% equity in a home, which would basically force people to put much more money down payment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that down payment is a big factor. I get a lot of people, hey, how little can I put down? Not how much can I put down, how little can I put down? So down payment is a big factor, and I think that suppresses home buying a little bit, but that also encourages affordability in homes, which a lot of home builders then go to condos and these other types of home building styles, if you will, or communities, to help curb that cost a little bit. Here in Arizona, we have quite a few starter homes, but we're seeing a shift. Arizona is just like what you said. Hey, most people want to buy ranches here. That was how Phoenix was kind of set up. Mm-hmm. Buy a ranch, buy an acre and a quarter, 2 acres, build your ranch home and live the American dream. Now we're seeing builders more community type deals. They're buying urban on the plots of land that haven't been sold and building up on them. Mm-hmm. Trump actually tried to buy downtown a plot of land. He wanted to put a big high rise in there, and we have laws here that restrict how high you can build a building here, so you can't put high rises to ruin the view. And he got shot down on that. But we're seeing that trend here, and I think that's in an effort to capture that segment of the buyers.
Absolutely. And like I said, on the whole, most millennials that you talk to, particularly when you're looking at an urban environment in particular, and Phoenix specifically. So I was talking to another big blabber here, and he's from Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that more and more technology jobs are going into Phoenix.
Big time.
And when you're a tech guy, you don't want to commute for an hour. I mean, you don't want to drive that long to work. So, I mean, that's where you have really the big draw. And it's really just about balancing game. Hey, do I want to sacrifice a little bit of space at home to have a 20-minute commute, to have a 20-minute walk to the office?
And you know what's interesting about Phoenix too is because there was we had such a downturn in our downtown area, and now it's making a comeback, and that land became so cheap, and the developers are now finally starting to build again, creating a more dense downtown. It's relatively cheap to live in the city of Phoenix, unlike a place like New York City or San Francisco or Boston or even Miami for that matter. So yeah, if you're a technology person, millennial, and you could buy something downtown for $200,000, that's super cheap.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's super. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. Everything has got its problems. There's, crime like in any area. But what I'm seeing is the millennials embracing the downtown core. We built light rail, which was a feat within itself to pass the first time around, and now we just passed Proposition 104, which was really interesting because that people thought it was going to get shot down. People are starting to see that we need to build up more in Phoenix than out, because we've just spread the city out so much that I think if we continue to do it, Phoenix and Tucson will become one megapolis, I guess you'd say. But it's good to see the changes, and there's definitely a lot of builders that are doing these communal type space, working spaces, job shares, all that kind of stuff. I read a lot in the Phoenix Business Journal. One of the publications I read a lot about is these kind of spaces where they have like a coffee shop in there and people can share ideas, and that's really embraced by the millennials.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I go to Starbucks almost every single day, and part of it's, hey, I'm in the office 10 hours a day, and sometimes you just need to change the scenery. So I'm right here in Princeton, and right downtown in the borough across the street from the university, we have a Starbucks that's open till 11:30. And people just get there at 11 o'clock at night wishing it was almost 24/7, because, I mean, it's a collaborative space. I mean, it's about going there and
socializing.
Yeah. It's not even socializing. I mean, you can be there working. I mean, it's almost inspiring by, hey, you know what? You could be sitting next to Ben Bernanke, or you can be sitting next to some other hotshot that's going to be there. But yeah, it's collaborating as well from that perspective. It is socializing. It's kind of like it creates the juju. And I think, Jason, you work by yourself, right?
Well, I work in an office.
In your office, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the biggest things, so as an independent advisor now, I mean, I love being independent. I love everything that we stand for. But one of the things that I miss was, as opposed to when I was at UBS and there was 60 other brokers in the office, I mean, it just, emotion, it creates, it just creates that atmosphere. It creates that environment that would be beneficial. So I think the communities, the urbanization, it's the communities, those community centers, I think that's really the big benefit. And that's the big draw to millennial. I mean, even myself. Yeah. And if I can't do it here, I mean, that's why I have a membership to Regis, where Regis has those office share spaces. You can just go in, say hello, hey, what's going on there?
Yeah, they're definitely big out here.
Well, I want to touch base too, real quick. Let's kind of move on from that. And let's go on to when they find a house, what exactly is it that is important to them in the home? Now, I have a list here, and I'd like to share it with you, and get your feedback on it. And certainly, Tracy, add anything here that you want to add in. But they're looking for a house that has less maintenance, that's easy, no formal dining rooms. I was kind of surprised at that one. I'm kind of a formal dining room kind of guy, especially when it comes to Thanksgiving, like having that. But, for millennials, they could really care less about that. Energy efficiency appliances, I think that's kind of universal through everybody. Yeah. Everybody wants to save money there. Hardwood floors, they like that, kind of that look, if you will, which is kind of hard here in Arizona. A lot of homes are tile here, but we are seeing that shift to hardwood floors. Comfort, they want the home to feel comfortable. They don't want to feel like a warehouse space necessarily. And the most interesting thing that I saw, which I am going to be one of these guys looking for it, but I'm kind of a tech guy, and I think we're all kind of tech people being on here. They want good cell phone service at the house, which brings me to the point of how important is having a home that has all these little gadgets and trinkets in the home.
Yeah, so I'll interject here for a second. So one of my friends, he's a T-Mobile engineer. We were looking for a house in Florida, and we found pretty much the perfect home.
Yeah.
It was everything we were looking for, about a mile from, actually less than a mile from the beach, private gated community. It was the sizes we were looking for. Best of all, for the Jew inside of me, it was a great deal. It was a foreclosure.
Right.
Actually, it was an REO that was already completely done and ready to go. The breaking point was there was no 4G service in that house.
There you go.
So I made a comment. I quickly get home. I get to the hotel. I'm like, hey, Joe, who's an engineer at T-Mobile, what are your plans for putting up a cell site tower here? Because the purchase of this home is dependent upon having service.
There you go. That, and I couldn't agree more with that. I live on my cell phone, given the business that I'm in. You're probably the same way. So cell phone service is important to me, of course. But I was just, as we're getting more and more information, especially millennials getting their information on the cell phone, I didn't really put it together that was that big of a deal. But landlines are almost non-existent now. I mean, when I take an application for somebody who's 40 years, a lot of them don't even have landlines anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's not, I mean, for example, we have a landline, but I mean, I never pick it up. It's like, it's there in case somebody needs it, or if it's a
product of the cable service probably, or something like that.
Yeah, well, but if you still have a fax machine, so I mean, we still have a fax machine. I have 2 lines just particularly for that.
Yeah.
But I think you just like, if you want to contact me directly, it's like, hey, just call me directly on my cell phone.
Yeah.
Particularly, I mean, I'm one of those people that, I mean, I go home to eat and sleep. The rest of the time, I mean, my spouse works with me at the office, so we bring the kiddo here and everything. We spend most of the time out. But at least that's right now. I mean, I will disagree slightly on your list. I think the list is awesome.
Yeah.
I'll say this, though. I think it's a universal list. I mean, aren't most people looking for that now? And we're talking about the connectivity. Well, I was surprised to find out my 69-year-old mother, she does the Facebooks and the Skypes with the best of them. Yeah. And she does the videos on her phone. So I would argue that cell phone service is important to her as well.
She's a hipster. Holy moly.
But I will change that, though. So one of the developers out of Texas that's building up a lot of the newer developments, they all do pre-wire. So for the new constructions, everything is pre-wired, and they do the Nest.
Yep.
Haven't used it myself, but they use that. So, I mean, I would say instead of cell phone service, what's important is having a technologically wired home.
Yeah, they call it like smart homes out here. Yep. I mean,
so there's an app.
Yep. Have that. They have the Nest. They have the energy efficient appliances, trying to go up to the green side, the net zero type of homes, all that kind of stuff, which also plays to the millennial generation. So definitely people want a home that's kind of has its own brain.
You know what, Jason? I think now reflecting on it a little bit more, what I would say is your list, I think it applies to everybody, but to a millennial, I think to us, it's a must have rather than a nice to have.
Yeah. No, I think, and Tracy and I were talking about this before the show, having the home that if you had 2 homes side by side to one another, and you had the Nest, and you had, the doorbell with the camera on it, and you had some of these other, cool little features that don't really cost very much. I think that if you had a house like that and a house that didn't have that, all things being equal, I think the house that had it would sell faster and for a higher price if the target audience for that house is a millennial.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it goes back to like sales 101. It's like, I don't care about what it does. It's what does it do for me?
Right.
And it's like, if I know, for example, I can go log on my phone and an app, I can take a look at what temperature is in the house. If I can see who rings my doorbell directly on here, it's a great benefit. It's like, now I'm basically putting a focus on the overall lifestyle as opposed to, hey, well, I can do that. Well, we can do a lot of things. It's kind of like, hey, when you have the light that your tire pressure is low, how many days do you drive on it still before you actually go fill it up? So it's the same thing. Yeah, you know what? I can change my thermostat. I can change the doorbell. I can put the cameras in there. But it's now, hey, now I got to go and do it.
Right. And that's where, You spend $500. I don't even know how much a nest is. I don't. What is it? $500?
No clue.
I think it's around that. Yeah.
$500. I think if you spent the $500, you could probably get $1,000. So that's double your money.
Yeah, it's something people want to differentiate themselves with. I mean, it definitely comes up with my buyers.
The cool factor, right? The cool factor.
It's cool.
Well, plus it's on all the TV shows.
Yeah, it's heavily promoted. Heavily promoted.
Exactly. So now, how important is location? If I build, like here in Arizona, we do a masterful job of building all these master plan communities, but they tend to be on the outskirts of Phoenix. Yeah. And Phoenix, the employment here, it's not unusual to drive 45 minutes, maybe even an hour to get to work. Now in the Midwest, where I'm from, Columbus, if you drove 20 minutes, it was like, what are you, nuts? You need to drive 15. So how important is location to millennials, to their maybe either work or their family, or, because when you talk about buying land, typically that's going to be in the outskirts, right? You're going to buy in upstate New York. Are you willing to travel down to where you work currently for that home? Or is the lifestyle more important to you to have that big home?
I think you have to separate the two. I mean, there's location and then there's the commute. So, I mean, for instance, I'll point you to the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
And just think of all of the growth that they've had out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the DFW area. But if you're thinking, I'm trying to think of a couple of the towns that are just north of Dallas, by the lakes, but out there, more of the jobs are going out there as opposed to back into the city.
Right.
So, Toyota's building a factory there. Apple was building and Tesla were building centers there. Mm-hmm. They're moving now in those areas, but they're not moving into the downtown area. They're moving out into the suburbs. But I would basically say, I have no problem driving a longer distance as long as I'm not sitting in traffic. But let's say, for example, if I'm in the city, so New York City, if I live in Brooklyn and I work in Manhattan, and that could still be a 20, 30, 40 minute ride on the train and then walking. Well, I'd rather just drive that distance in the suburbs if available. So, for me personally, I like the suburbs. I'm not really a huge fan of the urban areas. I think for most millennials, it's not necessarily the distance, but it's rather how much time they spend commuting.
Yeah.
Because it's like, look, do I spend the time commuting wherever it might be, either in the suburbs or in the city, or do I spend the time with family and friends and doing whatever else? And especially when you consider more jobs being telecommuted,
absolutely,
it becomes there's less of a focus on that. Now, I think right now, the overall trend, because most of the jobs are in the big high rises, people are going to go into those downtown areas, or they are going to go in the downtown areas because I can get a pizza or Chinese food at 3 a.m. in the morning. Not necessarily because I work there.
Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting you mentioned that about the suburbs in Dallas-Fort Worth, because we have a little bit of that also in Phoenix, because Scottsdale and Chandler.
Yep.
And they're getting a lot of big corporations, and those are definitely suburbs. But yet we're seeing the small businesses and the tech firms that want to use the communal space for the relatively low rent getting pushed also towards the downtown core. So it's an interesting mix.
Yeah, we got a question here in the chat here about whether or not we think
yes. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, I do think there's going to be a big change for telecommuting. We're already seeing that happening. We're seeing a lot here in Phoenix, a lot of tech companies coming to Phoenix because California is in so much trouble and it's so expensive. In San Francisco, they have buses that take people to work from San Francisco to Silicon Valley because it's so expensive in Silicon Valley. They can find good workforce here with our education system that we have here, the university and stuff. They have a good pool of talent here in Arizona. Plus, the cost of living is so much better. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see people telecommuting from Phoenix to San Francisco.
Yeah. So actually, I really am sorry I interjected to just answer that question. So, I mean, for the people who are going to be watching in a podcast, the question basically came in, do you think that there's a big change coming where companies will invest more in technology to allow home working, faster internet for staff, and time tracking software and voice over IP phone systems so you can route your work calls to your home phone and to your phone at home? I would say it's already here. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. I have a couple of clients who work for tech companies, and half of the time they work from home.
Yeah.
So one of them works for Hewitt, the other one worked for Watchdocs, which was just acquired by BlackBerry. And even when they were at Symantec and in other places, they work from home about half of the time, and the only time they left is if they actually needed to do a face-to-face meeting somewhere. So I think for more and more tech jobs, I mean, for sales jobs, for marketing type jobs, for consulting type gigs, you can absolutely do it from home. And Tracy, even as a realtor, I mean, so Periscope Ryan was doing a blab how realtors can leverage the technology and not necessarily even do it from the office, but doing it from location, or even you can do a lot of the stuff from home. So I think it's important. I think it might be a bigger trend in the future, particularly because millennials are kind of asking for that. They'd rather accept lower wages, but ask for more money. And I think that's a different topic. One of the things that we cover is, hey, it's not just about your salary. You got to take a look at your total compensation package and the benefits. And having the ability to work from home is something that's going to be important. In our own company, I have 2 employees who work from home. They have their voice over IP phones. They just plug it into their home router. And when somebody calls in, they call in the office number, it rings it for home. And so for most people, they can't even tell that there is a difference from the client side of it. But it allows them, hey, look, I mean, he used to be 10 minutes from my office, but when I moved my office to the other side of Jersey, it's an hour commute. And for most of the things that he needs to be able to do from home, well, he doesn't need to drive into the office. And then when you apply technology from the security side, so not necessarily from the tracking software side, I think it does work and it's important. I put more emphasis on, hey, if you get the job done, I'm okay with that. But we put a big focus on security. And so let's say, for example, we use BlackBerry. We use BlackBerry Enterprise Server. So now anything that's work related, I know that it can't be shared and we have full control over that. I'm 100% okay. Hey, you know what? Work wherever you want to work. You want to work from home? Work from home. You want to work from Starbucks? Go work from Starbucks.
Yeah, we have that same thing here. A lot of our realtors will work from home and underwrite from home. And a lot of even loan officers will work from home. And I know, Tracy, a lot of your compadres in the real estate industry work from home as well.
Yeah, it could be more efficient. And you know what? You never know where you're going to meet a client. So why be stuck to an office? You know, I mean, we can do everything on the road, and technology is so key to the success of our business, from using like Blab to making videos for our clients, you know, using social media. I mean, being in the office, sometimes you just end up talking all day and not doing much work.
And I think it kind of goes back to answer the question that we were discussing, which is, well, why do millennials choose to live in a city? I don't necessarily think it's because that's where a job is. I mean, it might be right now, it might not be in the future, but it's for all the other community type benefits that are going to be available for them. It's the restaurants, it's the co-location, it's where things are happening.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a gentleman here. It looks like he's from Bulgaria, I think, CMC. Not sure how to pronounce your name, so forgive me there. But it looks like you're running a real estate business that used to be in the UK, but you're running it in 2 different places. So obviously you're going to telecommute, or Scotland. Okay, cool. Scotland. So it looks like you're telecommuting, and real estate can definitely be done through telecommuting. We see that quite often here, even in Arizona. We even have loan officers who are licensed in multiple states that do loans and outside and telecommute, with everything. Most companies were becoming paperless. And so that kind of goes back to millennials, though. So then how important is really location? Is location really that important? Because location always has been about the amenities that the location has to offer, but it also in relation to their lifestyle and where they work. A lot of people want to be close. Maybe they want to ride their bike to work rather than taking the bus or something like that. So location is still key, I think. But, for some millennials, I don't know if they telecommute. I don't know if it's that big of a deal for work, but more lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think telecommuting is still not the norm. I think it's more accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we'll basically have to take a look. I mean, definitely with us over the past couple of years, I mean, at first when I went independent, I was like, hey, everybody's at the office. This is, I don't care what we are. But now it's, hey, depending on the task that you want to get accomplished, it's okay if you do it from home or wherever. And then for certain other things, come into the office.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think I'm just recalling numbers. 3 clients that we were working with, they actually moved out of New Jersey, and they're all in the tech field because their company is okay with them telecommuting. So 3 people left. 1 went to Texas, 1 went to Vermont, and 1 went to Florida because their company that was in the tri-state area, they're completely okay with them doing the job from there.
And I think a good thing to bring up too is that as the millennials, become this larger section of the population and go into the management roles, we're going to see that more open-minded approach because, I'm going to be 40. I just turned 40. I grew up with having to be physically seen in the office. I learned about BlackBerry. It was like introduced when I was in the middle of my career. And I remember like you'd work all hours. Now you still work all hours, but at least you could do it from home. But I remember back in the day needing a token to sign in and it would shut down. The internet would be slow. So all you did was you stayed in the office. But now with the way technology is, you could do business anywhere.
Well, the other trend to that is having babies. I think so. I mean, right now, the popular thing for millennials and for the techies, we want to live in the city, but I don't know that many millennials who think it's okay to raise a family in a 5-story walk-up with no outdoor space.
Yeah.
So I think as the millennials start having babies, that's where it's really going to be the focus on, hey, I want to go back into the suburbs.
Well, and how much, and I don't want to get too like political on this, or religious, I should say.
It's okay.
How that's what this is for, right? How important, and we've seen a big resurgence here in people's religion, right? Not John Paul, but Francis here has had a big impact on the younger generation in getting back to their core values, if you will. And he's made some changes within the Catholic community to accept some things. How important is that church or does it relate to real estate? Because you talked about family, right? I've heard and seen reports of millennials not so keen on having families, not so keen on raising the traditional family, maybe not getting married, maybe just living together, and having a family that way. Do those kind of cross paths, do you think? The way people perceive religion or their lifestyle in relation to, real estate? I mean, polygamy, right? I mean, I'm not saying polygamy and, it's a good thing or anything like that, but that's a lifestyle. And that then translates over into real estate and how they, raise their family. How important is religion, or does it even cross, or am I way off base here?
It might be depending on the areas. I mean, I don't think it really would change anything. I mean, whether you're living together with someone, you're still having kids, you still got to live somewhere.
Yeah.
I think it does make a difference depending on the area, like you just said, especially out in Arizona, where some of the church communities have a huge presence, in particular, certain sections of the Phoenix metro area, where that is important to be near their church and to do business with people who are up, in their same church. And in fact, there was an article in the Arizona Republic that talked about real estate and that the best way to get business is to actually go through your church. And that is an interesting comment, because coming from the Northeast in New York, we didn't really see that or talk about it as much, but out here it's very prevalent. I think there is some impact regionally.
Yeah, Mormon. I mean, this is the second most populated Mormon community in Mesa, outside of Salt Lake City. So very heavily Mormon influenced here, and they're big proponents of having housing and the yard and their certain lifestyle and close to the church, being active in the church and their community. So I think that plays a part, and they want to be close to their family and mom and dad and all that kind of stuff to help raise the family. It takes a village to raise a family kind of deal. But for people like in New York, maybe it's not as prevalent. I don't know. I know here in Arizona, it does play a big factor.
Yeah, it's funny. I just was reading the comments here from I can't pronounce the name in Scotland. I lived in Europe as well, and I agree with you 100%. It didn't make any difference religion in Europe whatsoever when I was there.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've talked here for about almost an hour, believe it or not. So, which is really good conversation. And to remind everybody, we were talking about millennials and real estate, the next generation of home buyers. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to be a part of it, George, I see you hanging out there, buddy. You need to jump in here. I'm going to call you out there. George and I have a show tomorrow night, so please tune in for that, a real estate roundtable. Or Justin or anybody else that would like to jump in, please jump in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on if you have any insight as to millennials and the attitude toward real estate. We know that it's becoming it is a big segment of our population. We need to be aware of that. We need to know what the changes that are coming, if you will, when it comes to real estate and the attitude toward real estate. Tracy, speaking of attitude, we've spoken off camera about the attitude toward real estate. Mm-hmm. Here in Arizona, after the crash, everybody was like, I hate real estate. Real estate's not worth it. I'm going to rent forever. I could care less about, real estate. It's cheaper to rent. I don't have to worry about the expenses of rent. I can just move whenever I want. I can be mobile, do whatever the heck I want. Carefree lifestyle. We're starting to see that shift now.
As rent got so expensive.
Well, and housing formation too. I mean, there's still a lot of, like I mentioned, my brother at the beginning of this show, that he lives with my dad. We're starting to see those people as they grow up as Max. How do you pronounce your name again?
Max.
Max.
Maxim.
Okay.
It's Maxim or Max.
Max. As he mentioned before too, as they grow up and start having babies, they start looking for homes and things like that. We've seen a shift of attitude toward real estate in the sense that, hey, I need to grow up. I need to get out of my parents' basement and I need to figure something out. I got to do something to purchase a home. And so that's what this whole conversation has really been about.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the sandwich generation, which is basically the Gen Xers now that, hey, they have kids of their own, but as their parents are getting older, I think the trend is, and actually a couple of developers that I was talking to, they're seeing a bigger trend in having homes with either in-law suites or two masters, because they're basically getting ready for either their kids staying in their home longer or they're getting ready for their parents to come into their home.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We just talked about a builder before we got on live, that they're building these homes within a home for either in-law suites or an elderly parent or for, the child that's still at home. And so they're trying to create all these new products. And it's even another interesting thing that's going on out here is home builders building houses just to be rented, which is interesting. So they're never meant to be sold as a single family resale, but as a rental home. And it's not a vacation home. It's meant to be rented for an annual basis or longer. And that's an interesting thing. And that's becoming big in Arizona as well.
Yeah, we've seen home builders, they're obviously targeting that segment of the population. They see that trend continuing, and they're doing those flex floor plans and having those in-law suites. And they sell a little bit to saying, the baby boomers are getting older and they're moving in with the kids. It's kind of reversing a little bit.
I would say the other trend with that, particularly that you guys are facing in Arizona, and we're starting to see a little bit here in the Northeast, is actually the immigration into the country. And a lot of them, they're multi-generational. A lot of the immigrants that are coming in, I mean, I guess we can say almost anywhere outside of the United States, there's much more focus on family values, that it's on the family unit as opposed to people individually. So they do value having a home for everybody.
Yeah. Hey, Craig, hopefully, I don't know if maybe you're going to join us back here, but when you do join us back, do us a favor and tell us who you are and how we can reach you. Cause I do podcast this. So hopefully you'll get your camera straightened out there. But when you do join us, tell us a little bit about yourself, how we can reach you, and how people can get in touch with you. So, so hopefully you can get back in. You're probably in Scotland, I would imagine. So hopefully he'll be able to reconnect with us here. So, in regards to the millennials and how they view properties, how, like my brother, I talk to my brother all the time. We talked about this a little bit, about the attitude. He wants to buy, but really doesn't know where to go to buy. So we talked about millennials being educated, right? They are educated, but can you be overeducated in it to a point where you just get confused on what to do? Because I think that's where my brother's at.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah. I think there's some truth to that with the millennials. They read these reports, as we said before, that are bad, that there's going to be another crash, right? Or they wait until the next president-elect or the next administration comes in and housing is going to be better. So, hey, I'm going to wait.
No, I personally think that's an excuse, though. I think really the bigger trend is, I mean, there is less of a, let's say, for example, no one's going to think less of you if you don't own your own home. It's completely okay with millennials if you rent. Right. You can have your own place. Particularly, I mean, look at all those people. I mean, the few millennials that did buy homes, and I'm working with them now, they're asking for my help as to how they can get out of their home because they're upside down on it. Yeah. And I think there's a comment in the chat. It's more about it's not about like, hey, it's not the pride and ownership of the home. It's what is that home going to do for me? It's going to allow me to have a place for my family. It's going to allow me a place to raise my kids. It allows me to have people over, but it's less the aspect of that I own that home. As evident by, you have hedge funds, you have larger institutions, they're going into the single home rental game. So there's two funds that I'm looking at right now. They're focusing on the Cincinnati and Nashville areas. They're going in there. We have a portfolio of over 1,000 homes, single family homes, and they're renting them out.
Wow. Well, hey,
and you have big names like Blackstone that are going all over the country doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we see Ross has joined us today. Hey, Ross, tell us about yourself and how we can reach you. And then the floor is yours, man. Here's your little plug.
What's up, everybody? Yeah, you just reach into the internet, you'll find me. No, I do a lot of stuff, but I do have a background in real estate. Right now, it's more marketing and startups and social media, but I've got some other real estate. I actually have a real estate training and support services company called Really Smarter, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm just redeveloping a website for that, where I just help people do the marketing side so they can focus on doing the real estate side and taking all the stuff that I learned, in my market when I ran my team, and then kind of helping them, because technology sucked me in, and so did marketing. And so I kind of came back, but I like helping other people kind of get a handle on that. I also do think tanks on like millennial mindset and different generational mindsets. So that's what, when I saw the title there, I thought, hey, if you add beer to that, you'll have millennials, real estate, and beer, then I would definitely be in. But I thought, I'm going to go in anyway. 2 out of 3.
All right. Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you, man. So how old are you? Are you a quote unquote millennial?
I appreciate getting carded. Yes. No, I'm not. I'm a Gen Xer, actually. I'm 42, so I'm sneakily young. We have the good skin in our family, I guess.
You don't have any gray hair in that beard at all, man. Good for
you.
I
know. I hide it a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I think that mindset is going to rule over age in this case, in a lot of ways. And I think that when you take a look at that and you look at the changing landscape of real estate, it's very important. Hold on a second. I've got some background noise.
Yeah, you got your little one there. I hear him. That's cool, man. He's on silent mode until he takes care of his child there. That's cool. Hopefully, can everybody still hear me? Right?
Yes.
Everybody still good?
Well, I'm actually going to take the opportunity. I'm going to hop off. Got to prepare for a late night meeting with the client. But I think another topic for conversation would be, so we're talking about the affordability aspect about it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've actually been working on, particularly with our later millennials and most of the Gen Xers, is alternative ways of coming down for the down payment. So they have investments, so using securities-backed line of credit, particularly while the financing is low. And while the rates are low, it makes sense not to borrow. It makes sense to borrow as much as you can.
Yeah, jump in. Absolutely. I agree. And I get a lot of requests on that. Thanks, Max, for being here.
Thank you, Tracy. It was a pleasure. Jason, good seeing you again. Ross, the floor is yours.
Nice meeting you. So and that's funny. That's actually an example of when you look at the different kind of generations and the mindsets, which I think work more. Like, I'm actually an early adopter for Gen X. So like, I had internet and I was checking email on my TV like 15, almost 20 years ago. So smart TVs to me are like really old, and then they're now here. So it kind of depends if you kind of follow, depending on who you are. And that's why it's important to look at mindset over just age range, because I think that's going to play into real estate as well. And the mindset of millennials, I was saying earlier, I think they don't see the structures in the same way. And so if you approach that and you're thinking, oh, well, are they, what do they want? And sometimes they get miscategorized, and it's like, no, it just looks that way because you're taking your mindset and then seeing how they're reacting, and you have to put a label on it. But in reality, I think that they're definitely look more at value, and they're willing to share a lot more. And I think you're going to have new models, just like Uber and things like that, where there's a lot more shared kind of economy thinking. How that'll play out in there, that's where renting kind of seems to fit. But right. I don't know that rentals is like going to be the only thing they're going to do. I just don't know, though, how their mindset, the traditional mindset for real estate, is like, own your piece. Like, that's how you've made it. That's how you're going to establish yourself. And I think for them, they're a lot more comfortable not being established and finding values in other places.
Yeah, no, good point. I think it is about the attitude toward real estate. But Matthew, hey, thanks for joining.
Hey guys. Yeah.
Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself, how anybody can get a hold of you. I will be putting this on my podcast. So
excellent.
Elevator pitch here.
All right. So I'm Matthew Feltner. I'm down in Austin, Texas. I'm a business consultant and strategist. And I just kind of wanted to hop in here because real estate and millennials, it seems to be a hot topic, especially in Texas, because we can't seem to keep enough houses on the market, even though I'm not in real estate. I've been around finance for the past 10 years. So it's a topic I'm well versed on. And me being a millennial, because I'm 31 years old, I can tell you right away that, I'm not a buyer, I'm a user. And what I mean by that is, we travel quite a bit. We're always in different, cities or states every few years. And, I like to invest in alternative things. See, I don't see a house as an asset. And a lot of people my age are the exact same way. They just don't see houses as assets. Right. A lot of that is, and what Ross said, goes back to the economy. I mean, I know this is unfortunate, but I know people my age that are still living in mom and dad's basement. Yeah. And they're just saving and saving and saving and saving, and they're working. And
right.
For what? Like, what are they going to do? Well, the unknown is there going to be a job? Right. Is there going to be a career? And when you buy that house, that is taking a lot, into consideration. And so since I'm a user, I like to use my product. I like to use the house. And then when I'm done with it, I want to get rid of it.
Just like a car.
I've never heard that before.
Exactly. It's exactly like a car. Like my cell phone, right? I use them for 2 years or whatever, and I get the latest, greatest one. Cars are the same thing. So why would I buy the most expensive thing I'm probably ever going to own besides a business?
Right.
And and invest all that money when I can take the same money and go invest it in multifamily where it's going to appreciate in value,
right.
See, and that's just me. I want bigger returns. If I'm going to put down $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 on a house, it's not going to appreciate fast enough in my mind. That's why I'm a user and not a buyer.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Makes sense. But do you have
look at? I was going to say, look at Verizon. Here's a perfect litmus test for this. Look at Verizon Edge, right? If you want to look at mobile with millennials is a great indicator of everything, right? Advertising, their use patterns, everything like that. If you look at it, if you just pay a few extra bucks a month, you can switch out your phone whenever you want. They don't want to own the phone. They don't want to pay. They want to have the use of it, but they don't care about owning it or reselling it or doing all this or a contract. They just want to be able to use it and be able to get the next thing that they need to use. And that's exactly what you were saying.
Because it's so costly, because of the cost. It's cost effective.
Right.
If I can use it and get rid of it in 12 months and financially I'm not going to see that impact, what do I care?
Yeah.
But let me ask you, do you think that is a short-term thought or a long-term thought process?
I think it's a modified thought from 08 and 09.
Absolutely.
Okay. 100%. Because I was in commercial lending in 08 and 09. And besides seeing businesses fall apart, we all saw the real estate explode, right? And imploded. Credit default swaps just blew this country out, and everything else went with it. So I think it's a modified, version. Because I did not think this way several years ago until I've gone through, a lot of the hardships that a lot of people have gone through. And so, I don't think it'll be like this forever, but until we can get far enough away to where people, start forgetting the 08 and the 09 problems, I think, eventually we'll get there. I know for a fact, I'm not going to keep this mindset forever. Right. But for right now, this is what works for me and my family.
Right.
And we're perfectly happy using and not taking something on for 10 years. And, with the way that this economy is, you're sinking what, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 into a house for what, minimum 5 years, just for like the ROI on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'd rather take that $30,000 and go put it in a business.
Do you think that is a product? Because I mentioned earlier in the show that we are kind of a product of our environment, and the environment was what happened in 2008, 2009. We have a distrust or appreciation of what a home will bring, right? We now are exposed to that values of homes can actually go down. But before, we really weren't exposed to that.
Sure. I also think this. And I'll say this real quickly. With that type of economy, right?
Yeah.
I saw so many people get strapped to their mortgages and they could not unload their house. And so they could not chase a job across the country.
Right.
I saw so many people get locked down. So, for example, hypothetically, if Joe Smith rents a house and his payments are $3,000 a month, he's out with a $6,000, breaking the lease, he's gone. But if he has a $3,000 mortgage, his home's probably what, $400,000, $450,000, right? And he's got to unload that. And the market that he might be in might not dictate that.
Yeah.
So again, that separates the buyers from the users.
Right.
Yeah. And just the point to say about that is, with the user mentality, almost everything's been negative since 2008. And people expected homes to get this huge amount of profitability off of it, and it went through the roof. And you know what? Really, when you bought a house back in the day, and I could speak, I'm 40 years old, I could speak my parents' generation. You bought a house not as investment, but as a home. But I don't think the way we think going forward is going to go the route of what my parents did. I think we're in a much more different time frame. And nobody wants to have too much cash strapped up in an asset that they can't convert quickly to cash. Or as you say, Matthew, you have to go where the jobs are. And if you're stuck in a house, you can't sell it. What are you going to do? And that's coming from a realtor who wants to promote home ownership. But it doesn't work for everyone, depending on what your situation is.
Right.
There's another layer I want to throw into the mix here, because I think it pulls it all together and gives some context. Notice also how this is impacted by the volume of change and the velocity of change. You see, what 2008 and all of that did is it's not just about, we're in this mindset for a little while, but then we're going to get better. It's that they were also raised in more rapid change and they've learned to live in that rapid change as technology. The minute they buy the iPad, it's like, that one's already starting to be old. This is a mindset that's going to go beyond and isn't going to slow down because the economy is strong or not. They have a mindset that says, it makes no sense for me. The world's changing too fast, whether it's like you were saying about job relocation,
Absolutely.
that's tied to change. Whether it's about, the economy could go bad, that's about change. All these things are about the fact that what I have today, I don't want tomorrow. And the real estate industry's got to recognize that when the largest generation takes over, which it actually did this year, but when it really starts to get further and they start getting into supervisor positions and they start to really take over in the business sector, this is going to be something that I think you're going to see a lot more of, almost like not even rentals, but I mean, I could see some things very fluid where companies are owning large groups, almost like not really apartments, but just, hey, we're going to do this. And then when I want to move over there, I'm going to swap it out. I'm going to almost like a timeshare or something. And I'm going to move over to Austin because the jobs are really cool there, or I just like it and I want to travel and do whatever I want. As freelancing becomes, I think, I can't remember what the number was, but I thought it was like 50% of the workforce was going to be freelance by like 2020 or something like that. The fact is that then you could go anywhere and do anything. And it's like, you could use the house, but you know what? It's not because I need to move for my job. Actually, I don't actually need to be there, but maybe I want to go try this state out for a while and go try Arizona. And then, hey, let's go check out the East Coast. I think you're going to find people, because they're experience-based mentality as well, that's going to line up with housing. And you're going to have people who are going to hold houses and move people in and out a lot more, or they're going to, almost made me think of like assumable loans or something like this. Like there's going to be a new model of disruption where people can move shit quickly.
I agree.
Ross, you're exactly right. Exactly right. And because that's what me and my wife have done. Like literally several years ago, we were living in Texas and we're like, hey, let's just go to Colorado. We picked up and went to Colorado. And then we were there 4.5 years. And then we decided to go to Florida. We literally picked up and just went to Florida. And we were there 15 months and now we're back in Austin. So for us, and the reason for it is because we enjoy, again, new things, but we enjoy new opportunities, right? I think CMC said that, my generation, there's no forward planning. And I would have to disagree with that, because a lot of the millennials are planning. They're just not planning the way most people think they should plan. Right. They're planning financially. They are planning careers. They're, a lot of your, what Russ talked about, your, contractors per se, a lot of them are millennials, because they're figuring out how to make money in a tough economy, just like everybody else.
I think the millennials are more risk takers because you had to be too, as well, because you weren't guaranteed when you came out of college with $100,000 worth of debt, you were going to get paid, this 6-figure salary, which I think has changed dramatically in the past 10 years. And I think that people want flexibility because a company's not committing to their employees. So the employees therefore don't commit. So they'll come and go as they please as well. And I think the millennial generation is the most entrepreneurial spirited generation as well. You're not looking to go in an office 9 to 5 every day and expect to get a 3% raise every year. But those days are dead.
Well, let me ask you guys something. Do you think that companies then, in light of this, will do like corporate housing where they buy, I know during World War II or whatever, companies would, and I think this is actually kind of happening up in, Montana or North Dakota, South Dakota, where they're having that oil rush, where they're just buying, neighborhoods, if you will, and then saying, hey, here's corporate housing, come work for us and you'll make a rich life, but it's a simple house. It's a little,
we'll move you over.
Yeah. We'll move you over.
Here's what it's going to be. It's going to be just like I said, it's going to be like their cell phone, right? All you got to do is be a cell phone. They're going to say, hey, it's new features. Look, come over here and live here. It's going to be about the experience and about, hey, we're going to bring you all the way over here. We're going to take care of everything. We're going to get you settled in. And number two, also, it's going to be about, here's the features and the benefits that you like. They're going to sell that because it's like, hey, they're going to sell the city and then they're going to sell the features and benefits that you get and the perks, because you're going to be working probably from home. So when you think about that, like that's going to be a player on the thing for millennial movers. I can tell you,
Ross,
right now.
You're like reading my mail, bud. No, but it's exactly what it is. I mean, Ross, you are exactly spot on. I mean, I don't think there's anything to add to that statement, because you just hit the nail on the head. Because in this day and age, as fast, like we are in information overload right now, right? So it is about the benefits. It is about what it's in it for me, because if you don't offer it, someone else is going to offer it.
Mm-hmm. If a company bought, like I said, a condominium complex and said, Matt, hey, come work for us. Guess what? I'm going to pay you. What are you making now? I'll pay you 10% less, but you're not going to have any housing expense whatsoever. But you're going to have the greatest experience ever. It might be in the company's best interest to have some kind of formula like that, because they have an asset in the real estate and they don't have to pay you as much, but yet they get good productivity because you're happy.
Yeah.
No, and it's going to be experience too. It's going to be, hey, what else? I joked about how's the Wi-Fi, but yes, it is going to be like, okay, it's going to be probably them buying up places that are key, that, I can go from here and this is a premium spot and we want to own this for our employees as a perk, so that they're here, they're right next to the shopping, they're next to the all the stuff they want to do. Like, that's going to go, I think you're going to see a bit of a shift from being privately owned to corporately owned. And then I think you're going to have a third model, which is beyond corporately owned, which is when someone's owning the properties so that they can kind of lease them out to the corporate entities, so that they can bring in their people, so that they can share with multiple. It's going to be on multiple levels of sharing places, and it's going to be all built around, what do I get? Is that a cool environment? What's the culture like? What's the neighborhoods? Where do I want to be? And I that's just the different mindset, where I think people before was like, I'm going to fix up this home. Like, right, you have well-maintained. If it says well-maintained, well, somebody's retired there and they're sitting there fixing every dang thing there is that you can fix, right? I just don't believe that you're going to see that with millennials. It's going to be, what does it offer me? Because they're about fluidity. It isn't that they're short-term thinker or they can't think long-term or they're not going to. Actually, it's that being adaptable to them is how they survive, and it's how they find the value and the stability, is knowing that, I'm in a position where I could move my work elsewhere. I'm a freelance worker, so I could move over there if I got to take care of my parents, or I could move back here if I just like it because I love the beach and I want to be able to move when I want that. Like, that's what's their security. And so we just have to redefine what all the old models are and sell. That's why I said you're going to have a window, because there is a large group of people. Yeah. But you're going to have a window with millennials before new disruptive models really take over, to where you could just sell them that old real estate and you still have big Gen Xers. It's not like the planet's falling apart, and boomers and stuff like that. But I think if you're planning for millennial, you'll sell to them today, but in 5 or 10 years, you're going to be doing something different as far as your strategy with them.
I also think, sorry, please go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was going to say, do you think there's a danger in that? Do you think there's a danger in having that corporate housing? I mean, we have government housing, right? And that can be a little, argumentative. There's two sides of that story. It's no different than having like an army base or something. Like, we see that kind of, community developed with, Google, realistically, they could purchase just about any neighborhood in the country, probably. Facebook, same thing. Would you see some kind of, I don't want to say anything political, Nazi kind of, its own little nation within the nation kind of thing going on? Don't you think there's a danger?
There's not as much loyalty. I think even the millennials still have a personal brand, which is themselves. So they understand that they're a moving asset. And so because of that, I don't think you're going to get that same type of like, hey, I work for HP, so I'm living in the HP housing and I'm HP for life. No. Their loyalty is to me centered with the current values and adaptability. It doesn't mean that they're not loyal. It means that they are loyal, but they understand that loyalty is on wheels and it's centered on them, not on the company, because that company may change their views, or there may be something nicer that's offered to them over here, and they're gonna position themselves. They understand the value, just like keep going back to the cell phones, but just like the value of if all of a sudden AT&T offers something, then the other company's going to offer. And this is the way they're thinking, like, which one makes more sense to me? They're willing to change and adapt. They're not afraid of change like I would say maybe boomers are insulating against change. Whereas a millennial mindset is going to say, I'm going to maximize the change for my benefit. When can I upgrade? How am I gonna switch out so I actually benefit or have no of the downsides? I don't have to just, going back to what Matthew was saying, I don't have this house I got to unload. Like that seems like a negative thing. Well, if that's an unadaptable, that's like telling them, hey, you want to be in a contract that you can't get out of and you can't switch phones. No, that's not interesting to me. There's the current housing market. It's an old mobile, unswitchable.
Two thoughts. One, I would never live in a corporate housing environment like that. Because like what Ross was saying, this is so weird, but like what Ross was saying, I don't like the personal brand, your own identity. Like, you fight your whole life to break out of obscurity. Now you're going to go sink into it, and so that's how I think of that, corporate housing is you're just going to go be a number. Yeah. And the other thing with that is, this might be like the thinking right now, how, just millennials will exchange things for benefits and upgrades and so forth. But if the economy solidifies and there are true jobs being created and there are true numbers that are proven and people stop and like the news media gets off the like the end is near and whatever administration gets on board and we have some actually positive GDP beyond 2% quarter after quarter, I think the millennials will probably start buying, but they have to see that it's going to be solid for them. Stable. That is the thing. Look, millennials have been sold. Okay, my parents were sold a bill of goods about the American dream, yada, yada, yada. My whole life, we have been sold to and sold to and sold to and sold to. We're tired of being sold to.
Right.
What we want is to see facts and figures. We want to see actual numbers and things that come out of that. We're tired of being sold to. That's why I'm a user and not a buyer. I know what the housing market does. I know what it can do. I know what businesses can do. But the thing is, if you want millennials to buy, stop selling them, show them the value, create jobs. But I realize this is higher than any of us, but that's the only way the millennials are going to get past, a squirrel moment every 5 minutes and go into a house for long term.
Yeah,
I 100% agree on that.
Very good, Matt. I agree.
I was just typing too much, but now I'm just going to say it because I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could just send. But, the thing is the fact is they're observant because they're very aware. And so what happens is they see that isn't working out for those Gen Xers and the baby boomers, that even what worked out before in this environment, it doesn't work anymore and it's not really working that good for them. So why would they participate? You can't sell that to them no matter how good you are because they can see that it's not going to work for the future. And they're thinking like tomorrow, does that still make sense? It kind of looks like it doesn't make sense right now. I don't think that'll make sense tomorrow. So no matter how much you sell it, their mindset can't see that as a win for them. And so it's a no sale.
And I think one thing it'd be great for another blab topic is the American dream kind of dead, not just with real estate, but just the whole loyalty for corporations you can't expect much anymore. So
it's not dead. It's overregulated.
Overregulated?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and it's changed.
Yeah.
It's the American dream as defined before. It doesn't make sense as much anymore.
All right. So there's 4 people here. And I guarantee you, all 4 of us have 4 different definitions of the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, they're different.
But related to real estate, you know what I'm saying? Real estate, the American dream in relationship to real estate, that model is definitely not the same as it is. Because the American dream, I think, of 5 years from now is it's about lifestyle. I can work anywhere I want. I can spend more time with my friends and family. I'll have access to environments that'll allow me to have fun and do whatever I want when I want, and I can still get stuff done. And people, what I'm doing builds my value with me, and that value is transferable, just like my house is transferable and my phone can change. I'm changing and growing them and adaptable. I think that is going to be really absorbing that. And that's why I said experience. You look at some of the investors. What's Mark Cuban investing in? Experiences. Why? Because he's understanding already that that's what they want. They don't need to live there. They want to have a great experience. They want memories and they want a series of. I mean, just look at the social. They want Instagram. right? You look at their feed, that's what they want their life to be. A series of great experiences and events that is also changing, but is something that matters. They don't want one picture for 40 years and a watch at the end. That is of zero interest to anybody on Instagram.
Here's something. Please, Jason, go ahead.
Let me, because I'm running. I want to continue this conversation, but because this is really great, guys. I really love this. But I want to pause or stop the recording for the podcast because it is about an hour and a half. So thank you very much, Ross. we're not quitting the blab, but I am quitting the podcast. But thank you, Ross, for your insight, man. It's awesome. Matt, same thing, man. It's perfect, man. Hitting the nail on the head. I love it. Tracy, thank you for co-hosting this with me. Everybody that's in the room. We're not ending the show, but I do want to end the podcast